Welcome to Lifespring Church. We hope you enjoy this message. To find out more about Lifespring Church, head to linktr.ee/Lifespring UK.
So this is Jon and Gill, for those of you who don't know, Jon and Gill Hollands, people who are very dear to my heart. And before I hand the mic over to them, I just wanted to say a few things about them and what I think about them. And I'm sure for those of you who know them, you'll agree that they're very kind, very generous, they're very humble. I think out of seeing and experiencing, I believe that you two are very good parents, and I'm learning from you guys. And I think the most important one is that a lot of people talk about things, but I think their actions speak more than words in terms of how, they reflect God through their lives and their behaviors. So I just wanted to publicly thank you for who you are and what you mean to me and for the community here. And by the way, they just gave me that list and said, we'll give you a gift voucher if you say all those things. So I hope I've covered everything that I'm supposed to cover. No, but look, one fine day, Jon turned up in the rain and just fixed my fence post and just had a cup of tea and went home. That's the type of guy he is. So thank you so much. But look, for the benefit of everyone here, for people that maybe partially know you or don't know you at all, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourselves, both Jon and Gill? So over to you.
Okay, so my name's Gill, as you know. I'll just give you a quick beginning to present profile of my life so far. I was born in Warwickshire, and my dad was a farmer. And when he was 3, he sold up the farm, and we moved to Buckinghamshire, and Buckingham's where I grew up. I went to college at 17 to study how to be a farm secretary, which was like counting cows and corn rather than, money and other important things. And very quickly say I then married at 19, and we have two...
To me?
Yeah, to Jon. Yeah. Sorry, missed that important part out. And we had 2 wonderful children, Ben and Dan. Actually, the other way around, Dan and Ben. And we now we ran a business for 30 years doing fence posts and the like, and we have 4 wonderful grandchildren. And about a year ago we retired from our work. So that's us up to this date.
Very quickly, Gill, you're a Christian, right?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I wanted to give that bit of my life just a bit more attention. I didn't just want to scoop through it, because I was very blessed in that my parents were Christians, so I was brought up to go to church every week. So I always knew that God loved me. I had never doubted that God loved me, from the choruses that we used to sing when I was a kid. But there was a certain time when I was quite young, actually. I was probably under 10. But I heard about Jesus like I heard about him every week. And for that particular moment, I realized that it wasn't just that God loved everybody, but he specifically loved me. And so much so that he sent his son to die for me. And it was that particular night I went home from this gospel service, and I said to my mum, as she prayed with me each night, I said, I want to give my life to Jesus. So that was the start of my journey with Jesus. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm from Reading, and I know a lot of people nowadays who come here aren't from Reading, but I was born here. Again, I was born also into, my mother and father both went to church. They believed in God. And I spent my formative years probably being slightly bored by going to church, and it was okay. It seemed the right thing to do, but it didn't really grab me. When I got to my teenage years, I I kind of thought, there's some far more exciting things in life than just going to church on a Sunday. And so for a little while, I sort of wandered off from perhaps what you call the faith that my mother and father brought me up in. But at about 18, I had to make some choices. And it was at that time that I decided, this might sound really strange, but I think I had an experience where I actually came face to face almost with God. In a sense, I didn't see him, but there was something real happened in my life. And I made choices then, and the choices I made was that whatever I was going to do, I was going to follow God. So again, I don't want to just repeat what Jill said, but I got married at 20, the ripe old age of 20. And
to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I've already done that bit. And like Jill said, we lived on a farm for 5 years where I was milking cows. I absolutely loved it. And then that came to an end, and eventually we took over a business and did that for 30 years. And for the last year, we've been retired, which has been fantastic.
Excellent. So that's a very quick overview of who you guys are and what you've done in your backgrounds, but we all know that there's a lot more to the story about you. Yes, you've experienced God and he's done things in your life. So, and I know that you're here today because you want to share that, and you're very excited to share that because you've been talking about the goodness of God, and we all know that there's never been everything's great. There's been ups and downs, right? So is there anything that you particularly want to share on that?
Yeah, so when I was just coming to the end of my 2 years at college, in the last couple of weeks, my mum died, so I was 19 at the time. She took her own life, which was a very hard thing for me to cope with because she knew that I was going to be getting married in the November. She'd met Jon. And what hurt the most was the fact that she chose to not be at my wedding. And when you're 19, you're so full of yourself and your world that you don't really think about other people. And so it was quite a long journey towards coming to a place where I understood that it wasn't something that Mum had done lightly, but I didn't understand about the difficulties that people can have with how they feel and the emotions that they feel. But that was a very hard time for me, so I was grieving for the 3 months running up to our wedding. But it's something that we were just saying to a friend this morning, you don't get over things, but you learn to live with them. And I've learned to live with the fact that I haven't got a mum. But God has been amazing to me. When we go through things in life, sometimes we feel we don't know how to react to things, and it seems to me that I could either run away from God and blame God for what had happened, or else I could turn to him. And I guess it was helpful, the upbringing that I'd had made me want to turn to him. I felt I needed him more than ever through that really difficult part of our lives. So should I say about us? So we got married. We haven't really said how we met, have we? But we didn't just turn up together and get married. I was at agricultural college. Jon was at agricultural college, but a different one. And we had actually met through a camp, a church camp. And strangely enough, this building was where we had our first date when I was 14 and Jon was 15. So we came here to the cinema to watch Oliver Twist, unforgettable experience. So that was when we were just first going out. But we married, as I say, in the November after Mum had died. And life wasn't easy for us. We were just a young couple of kids, really. And I was very insecure. I was very broken. And I can even remember when we were first married, I couldn't go out of the bedroom at night time because I had this vision of my mum, and it scared me stiff. And John, if I got up to go to the toilet in the night, he had to go with me and see me out onto the landing where I felt safer. So it was not an easy time, and I guess there were lots of people who thought, well, this isn't going to last very long, is it? Because we were just such kids, and that is part of our testimony. How we're still here, we're sat here today, telling you our story, because God has been so faithful to us and has helped us through. That's one of many hard times.
So after we'd been married a couple of years, Jill noticed some health problems that we couldn't get to the bottom of, nor could the doctors. She was having night sweats, which were ridiculous, things like that. And it took it was about two years in that one of the doctors once said to Jill, I think you need to go and see a specialist. She went to see a consultant, a heart consultant. That night, if we can get this roughly in the right order, that night I went in to see the consultant because he called me in. And he basically said to me, your wife could be dead in the morning. She has a rheumatic fever. It's eating away at her heart valve. There's a culture we're trying to grow from what's eating her heart valve. There's about 60 penicillins we could put her on, but only one will be right. We can't put her on all of them. We put her on 4, but who knows? So it was a bit, I was a bit shocked. That night I was babysitting for somebody, and again, this is one of the ways God shows us his love is by putting people around us. And it was for a guy, he usually plays bass here, actually. He's away in Stockholm at the moment, but he just put his arms around me and said, if I was you, John, I'd be saying, God, why me? And he just understood where I was at. And and the next day, half the church turned up at Jill's hospital. She knew nothing about this. They didn't want her to worry. And she thought, isn't it lovely? They're all coming to see me. I think they were all coming because it might have been the last time they saw her. But we got the news the next day that one of the penicillins they'd done was beginning to fight back the disease. So that was quite a period of a few years of Jill in and out of hospital, weakened by this heart valve that was half eaten away. But again, God was amazing, because it took a long time before things actually she had to be operated on, and she lived well and she lived healthily, and we were told we couldn't have any children. Then they said, well, you could try one, and we had one, and then they said you could try another, and so God, we could see God in all of it, that through all of it he was good. A couple of years after that, we had probably what we'd call I'm copying the late Queen here, it was a kind of annus horribilis. Time on the farm was where we expected to be the rest of our lives, and suddenly the boss decided he was going to sell all the cows. That was my department. I used to get up at 5 every morning. I had these 120 girlfriends that would come and see me, and they all had 4 legs, and I was there. I was there. I helped them give birth. I did everything. I just loved that job. And he came and said, I'm selling all the cows, and I'm going to make you redundant. Well, with a farm job also comes a very nice house, which is part of your pay. So not only were we redundant, we were going to be made homeless. A few months after that, I believe it was, that we were expecting our second child, which was very exciting, but Jill miscarried very late, and we just thought, what else earth can go wrong? It was a tough time. We were limited in our home. We were kind of sort of almost homeless, or we were due to be homeless. And it was a really tough time. You think, well, okay, God, we're giving our lives to you. Why is all this? But, God never promised us trouble-free lives. In fact, he said, when you're in the world, you will have trouble. But he said, don't worry, because I've overcome the world and I'll help you get through it. And that's the way that we could see, looking back, God helped us through it. How we came through, in a way, unscathed emotionally, because God was with us. And do you want to add anything about those hard times.
Your
It was-
dad. The small
Yeah.
issue of your dad.
In the middle of this, I lost my dad, actually. Suddenly, my mum rang one Sunday morning. I'd just gone back from milking, and somebody else came on the phone and said, "John, I think you better get up here." He lived 10 minutes away. He said, "I don't think your dad's well." I didn't make it. I never saw my dad again, and Dad was very special to me. So at 24, I'd lost my dad. Jill had lost her mum. We'd just lost a child. We'd lost our job. We'd lost our house. And you think, where were we going? But should we get on to some better times? Because it was...
Yeah. And then Ben came along. So we were blessed with the second child. We had originally, you know how you'd have these talks when you're first married or even before you're married and you talk about how many children you'd like to have. Well, we decided we'd like to have 4. John was from a family of 4 children. I was too, so I don't know whether that influenced. But I forgot to tell you, I had 3 brothers. Yes, 2 older brothers and 1 younger one. I forgot to do that in my profile. So, what was I saying? What was I saying?
Right, so we moved out of our house off the farm. I had no work, so I kind of took self-employment, and I did a bit of mechanics work. One of Jill's brothers was a window cleaner. He said, "Come up and I'll show you how to window clean." I got a ladder. When I got home, I went and got a window cleaning round. I used to work for a builder. I would just get any work I could. But interesting, in this time, when the farm sale came up, and I have to say this really, losing the cows was one of the worst things for me. A lot of you won't understand this, but this was my job. This was what I threw everything into, upgrading the herd of cows to be so much. I was into the breeding. I was into how they were calving, what bulls I'd use. Yeah, it took my life, and all of a sudden that was taken away. And the day the last cow went off the farm, because we sold them all, I was at the sale. I was actually organising them all. Jill says, "I just came home and I just broke down." That was the end of it. That was my job gone. That was my living gone. It was more than a job. It was a life on a farm. And but what I did do was I bought 20 of the calves because they were going so cheap, nobody wanted them. And the boss said to me, he said, "Well, look, you can live in the house for a year to get your own house." I said, "Can I borrow a few buildings and buy some food off you?" So we had these 20 calves that we reared for a year. And when we sold them, it became a deposit for our house. And again, you can just see the goodness of God, how he was providing for us in many ways. And I was never without work, was I, all that time. And so we moved into a house that wasn't particularly nice because we were used to fields and trees. We moved into, which some of you might think is very nice, Waverley Road. And we were very grateful to move there. But the first night I had to... Oh, this is disgusting. I had to clear about 2 inches of dog muck, which was all around the house, because the people before had just kept their dogs in the concrete around the house. The house stunk. It was all we could afford at the time. But we were thankful to God for it, but it was tough, wasn't it? Within a couple of years, it was a time when landlords were taking over houses in the area and putting all sorts. And one night we had... there was a gang of black people with machetes going around the road, slashing tires, and it just, coming from a farm to this, we thought, what? This was tough. We didn't enjoy it very much, but from then on, it sort of got better, really, didn't it? Do you want to carry on a bit?
Yeah. So when John was just we were making ends meet with whatever work he could find, but then a friend had asked him if he would like to join him with his little business that he'd started up, which was the business that we ended up taking over a year later. And that was our 30 years of work that we ran. I don't think I'm exaggerating in saying that over those 30 years, we probably employed, for short times or longer times, over 40 guys. Now, that could sound really bad, like, oh, you must have been really bad bosses because you kept changing them. But actually, it wasn't that. It was that guys seemed to... Sometimes they needed just a place to hide for a little while if life had dealt them a hard blow, and they would just come and work for us for a little while, and then when they're feeling stronger, they would move on. Other employees stayed for a very long time. But we were blessed in that, and we saw it not just as a job, but as a ministry, if you like, a way of serving people, a way of helping people. And John felt like each employee was a son to him, so it was more than just providing work, but kind of helping people in their lives. So that was a great blessing to us. But during that time, obviously my heart had got very damaged in the initial rheumatic fever. And they had always said, one day you will need to have heart surgery. And it was during this time in 1995 that it got bad enough. They just kept an eye on me, and when it got bad enough, they operated. And that was a big thing then. I think if I had this same operation done now, they'd probably do it keyhole. But in those days, it was like, open heart surgery. And
if you get close to Jill, she ticks.
Yeah.
You can hear the tick. It's brilliant.
Yeah, so I have a metallic valve. And the worst thing about that was as I was getting weaker, I suppose, being a mum and a wife, I struggled. So, I would need to sleep in the day, and I just felt like I wasn't a very good mum because I couldn't be there for the boys like I wanted to be. But anyway, God saw us through, and I ended up spending Christmas in hospital, which was another thing I won't go into, but not an easy time to not be there for your children on Christmas Day and all of that. And they said that recovery would take 2 years, and I thought, not me, I'm only 35, this will be fine. But actually it did take 2 years before I felt completely back to normal again. But again, God was so good to us, so faithful to us. He gave me strength, he gave me rest when I needed it, and no permanent damage was done to our children, as far as I know so far anyway.
Yeah, so that's really great. And John hosts a group on a Monday evening, and I've been for a very long time, probably about 8 years I've been going to that, and it's been a real strength and an encouragement. I know that you could have written all of this in a blog somewhere for people to read, but you're here now. God's done some amazing stuff, and there's been highs and lows, but what now? What does it mean to you, and what would you say to everyone here?
Do you know, as a young guy facing possibly the death of your wife, having to go through the death of your dad, the death of Jill's mum, death is something that, it's a cliche, but it's part of life. In the Bible, it tells us actually that every one of us has a sense of eternity. We know this isn't really it. There's more after we die. And the only bit that dies actually is this body. And as I'm getting older, I'm realizing how much it's not so good as it used to be. It's something that happens to all of us. But I knew that because of, how do I say this? The Bible says that in a sense, none of us have come up to God's standard. That's what it says. None of us, and because of that, we can't really approach God. He can't be with us. So something had to happen for that to happen. The Bible calls it sin. It said everyone has sinned and hasn't come up to good enough. Well, none of us are good enough for God. The Bible's a great leveler. That's truth. None of us are good enough for God. In order to make us good enough, and this is, I guess, part of the faith that I believe in. God sent Jesus to die on a cross. He lived a perfect life. And what basically the story of the Bible is, the good news is that we can appropriate that death for ourselves and we go clean. So my slate has been wiped clean because Jesus died on a cross. And because of that, I knew that one day I'm going to live with him forever. The Bible talks about death as separation from God. And I know that if Jill died, I would see her again. I know as my dad died, I know I'm going to see him again. I know as Jill's mother died, I know I'm going to see her again. That kind of truth helps you through situations. That actually our eternity, whatever happens on this earth, my eternity is secured with God in a place where he says there's no injustice, there's no death, there's no sickness, there's no crying. It talks about that. The Bible, unfortunately, does talk about another place for the people who don't access that goodness of God in their lives. And it doesn't, what authority has the Bible got to talk on what happens when we die? Well, I would think every authority. And because of that, I believed that God had saved my life. And I know he has, and that I will live with him forever. So facing Jill's death, it would have been absolutely tragic. I would have been bereft probably for years, and I would still carry that. But I knew one day I would see her again. And the same with my dad and mum. So those sort of beliefs in what we believe in. Some people say, what is faith? And they say, well, I wish I had the faith you had. Faith comes by believing in God. And I think it was that belief in God, Julian, that really helped me through where we were. And the future, I don't know. It's exciting, though. I don't know what I'd do. But I trust God. I might die tomorrow, but it's not the end of the world. It's not that we don't know what God has in store for us. What we do know is he's good. He loves us. He created us. And we totally believe in his goodness and his faithfulness. So...
Amazing. So I guess you at one point decided to follow Jesus. I guess nobody forced you, or it was a personal choice, and you are here now sharing what you're sharing because of the experience, right? So is there anything else you want to add, or are we good to close now? Anything you want to add, Jim? Good? Excellent. So thank you so much. That was really encouraging, and I think it's great to know that no matter what the circumstances are, that we have somewhere to go, someone to rely on. And thank you so much for sharing. I know it's not always the easiest thing to come and share your experiences, but thanks. So can we give them a round of applause, guys?
Thanks for watching this message. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. To find out more about our church, head to linktr.ee/Lifespring UK.